Hi everybody, this is Tor Storley and I am back with another video. Okay, remember in the last video I said that DBT consists of a few building blocks. One of them is SQL models written in SQL. One of them is Jinja2 syntax in order to use more like a find replace text strings. So what I wanted to do in this video is just take you through some of the Jinja syntax, and I kind of want to relate it to how it's being used in DBT. Now, I was conversing with Claude Sonnet 4.6, I think it is now, in order to create a Iron Python notebook, or a Jupyter Notebook as you might be calling it. So I'm going to use that with some examples to demonstrate how you can implement the concepts that you will find in DBT. And I think it serves a good illustration of how you can see what it produces versus what is being written. So let's take a look at one of these notebooks. Claude spitted out this nice notebook for me. I asked him to create, and I went back and forth a few times with him and asked about the formatting and setting it up and write some meaningful information, etc., etc., etc. So this is the notebook it came up with. Now, one thing you have to do is you got to make sure that you have Python available. It's Control-Shift-P, and then you use a select interpreter. If I'm going to run DBT, I would have to use 3.13 version. Now, I have that installed on this Vanna environment, so I'm using that one if I need to run Python code. So just so you know, that's why you see Vanna up here, okay? It has nothing to do with Vanna. Vanna was a previous video I created, but this one, I'm just using the Python install of it. Now, notice what it says here. You want to pip install Jinja2 or UV, whatever code base you have to use. And some of the delimiters that Jinja2 are using is this double, I don't know, what do you call these? Double, like struct syntax, like double struct syntax. I don't know what you call these. And here is another one for statement logic, like for if and for statements. This is more for expressions like values and vars and stuff like that. And then you have comments. So these are the three you should get familiar with. Now, in this first instance here, a lot of these examples are written so I can demonstrate the input and output. So it is ready, so it's installed, it's fine. You can just copy this thing for yourself. Now, starting with variables, and when you look at it here, it's used typically for like references to other model names in DBT. So you have like this ref parenthesis and then the name of the model you're referring to, and it will replace this piece with that name, okay? Or like source, schema, table, etc. So here's an example. You create a variable that is equal to, and then you have a doc string like this. You say select star from, and this is the replacement portion, which is written in Jinja2, okay? And where status is equal to the replacement portion. And when you call it, you're going to pass in these variables, right? So you have table name, schema, and status. So it's going to replace these guys with these values. So when you run it, it looks like this. Select star from analytics.orders, because schema was analytics, orders were table, and completed was the status. So notice it's basically a replacement scheme written in Jinja. It's pretty basic in this form, but it has more to it. But a lot of the stuff you're going to see in DBT uses these type of technique. Now here's another one, and I'm going to move pretty quick through this because you're going to see it again and again inside the actual models, macros, what have you. Here is another one where you create some kind of text, and then you're passing in a variable, which is going to be the start date. Notice it's a variable, and it passes in the select star from orders where created at, and then you're going to pass in this config start date and region, config region. So when you look here now, you can see you have created a class called config. And then you have a start date and a region, and then you're just going to simply render that by passing in this class. So you can actually use a class as a pass-in variable into this code. So when you run that, you can see it still picks up the variables from the class, the start date, and the variable region from the class, and passes it into this text string and produces a SQL query. Another thing you can do in Jinja is filters, where you have a value and you use this pipe character. For example, you're passing in some kind of variable like a name, and then you want to say, hey, I want to make this uppercase or lowercase or title or replace this. So you have basically a combination here where you use functions, okay, like this. And then here you can see I'm rendering using this template here, and then simply name it order line items, and then here's the columns I want to cycle through and use for this. So when you run this, you can see you have uppercase, you have lowercase, order line. And again, it's a little overwhelming right now, I bet, because you've seen all these changes and all these. Just take some time on your own to I'm going to include this in my GitHub repository so you can play around with it yourself and kind of study it in a little more detail. I just have to keep moving because otherwise the videos will be too long. So here is the if else statement in Jinja2. So you remember when you do more like statement type of things, not just static variables or text and stuff, you usually use these percentages you can see here. So if, for example, so you can see here you prefix it like this. So here's a template that has if target is production or prod, then select from prod, else if the target is staging, then use this select statement, else use this select statement. So here you're passing in a few env variables, and then you are printing it out. So let's see what that looks like. So you can see the target is prod, select from prod schema, staging schema, and then dev schema. It's nothing magical here, it's just syntax and find replace type of things with logic. So here's another one, inline, and you can see here select order ID, amount, and then you recognize those two. There's no percentage here, so nothing really logic anything. It's just going to replace text basically. So if it finds this, it's going to replace it here. So in other words, first you're printing a VIP customer, and then you're rendering it. If you're passing in this flag, if ISVIP is true, then you're going to apply the discount. If it's false, you're just going to have a regular amount. So let's see what happens. So here is the VIP. You're getting your discount right here. And here is a regular guy. He doesn't get any discount. All right, so here is a variable using an if statement. So if filter date is defined and filter date where created at, and then you're passing in the date. So in other words, it expects you to set up a filter date with the date filter, passing in a filter date here, where created at, and then your filter date, right? If there's no filters, you're not getting any filters. So it just turns into this. Here's a for loop statement. This is where you take the template to be, again, it's an action or a loop or a statement, if you will. So you use these percentages. So you say for call, which is like a variable in columns, and columns typically is like a list. So this is for each item in this list. Put the item in here and then add this code logic to it where you say if not loop last. In other words, you're not on the last item. If you're not on the last item, you want to put in a comma. If you are on the last item, don't put in the comma. Very normal, very common expression for when you're building SQL statements where you comma separate each column as you go. So here you can see, depending on how many columns you have, you can add to this, and it will keep adding a comma after, but if it's the last one, it will not add a comma. So here you have it. This one does not have a comma after it, so that's the last one, which was this. Here is a dictionary object, which is like a key value pair. So here you say for the key and the value in all the items in this dictionary object. Here's the key, here's the value. Key, value, etc. So for each one of these guys, you're going to say for the key and the value inside all these items, when the key is CC, then the label should be credit card, etc. Here is what you're going to get. So there you have it. And then you have a set parameter, or I should say a variable. You can use the word set in a variable name equal to schema dot and then table. So basically you're going to add the schema to the table and put a dot between them. And then you're going to set the row limit equal to 500. So here's the select statement. From my table, which is going to be schema.table, use the row limit, which is 500. So let's see what that does. So you're saying select star from schema and table, where the row limit is 500, which you set up here. Okay? So that's how the set variable works. Here is a list, and then you're going to loop over it. So you say the template is set metric equal to this list, okay? And from metric, you're going to pick out each list item, this, etc. And then you're going to put them inside this sum statement. So here goes the item, total revenue, order count, average order value, as total revenue, order count, order value. If not, you arrived at the last one, then you're going to put a comma in. If not, you're going to not put it in, right? If it's the last item, you don't put it in. So, and then it follows with the rest of the text. So let's see what that looks like. So you run it. So here it is with a comma. Here it is with a comma, and no comma on the last one. So you can see here, you did a date trunk, which is the first one. Then you did sum for all these other, because you had a for loop. I think you're getting the hang of it here. There's also macros, and macros is more like statements, if you will, or functions. So, you want to use these percentages around it. You want to start it with a macro, and you want to end it with an end macro statement. So here is the start of the macro, and here is the end of the macro, as this. So use those tags. So what we're saying is that the template here says that the macro called cents to dollars expects this column name, and it expects to use decimal places equal to 2. So this is like a default value. If you don't pass any value to decimal places, when you call this, then it will simply use 2. So here, what we do is we create the select statements, and we're calling this macro, which is the one up here, passing in subtotal cents, tax cents, total cents, but here we're passing in 0. So let's see what it will look like. So run it, and as you can see on the last one here, it uses 0. The default value, because that's how you set it up, was 2. So that's what the select statement looks like. Here's a case statement, and you can set up your template like this. Another macro, you call it this name, passing in the column, okay? And here's your end macro statement. Here you're basically building a case statement where you say, whatever column you're passing in here, when it's less than 50, then it's going to be small. When it's less than 200, it's going to be medium. When that column is less than 1,000, it's going to be large. And the column you're going to pass in is called amount. So here is the call to the macro, and here is the column name, this one, okay? And it's going to check it against this case statement. So let's see what that looks like. So here it is. When it's less than 50, then small, 200, 1,000, and this is the column you passed in. So that's just another example of this. And whenever you put this particular syntax in, it will treat it as a comment. This will not appear in the output because this is a Jinja comment, meaning you set it up like this. Now, when you do this, that's a SQL comment. That will show up in the output. But the Jinja comment that is inside these brackets with this pound sign will not show up. So when I run that, you can see here's the SQL output. There's no Jinja comment, and the rest of the query just follow. The last thing I want to mention is this percentage minus and minus percentage in the end tags. The reason for that is that it trims white space. So when you have, for example, no white space, okay, control, then you're gonna get this one messy query here, okay? So here is no white space taken into consideration. So that's this one, okay? And here you do have the white space because you have percentage negative, and then you have a negative for N4, right? So as you can see, this produces a much nicer query because there's no white space. So you can fix it by using this percentage negative sign here in these queries. And that's really what it's all about. And then here is just an example of how you set up a CTE with orders as, and then you're basically building a reference to this particular model, to this model, to this model. And then here's your final select statement from this CTE. And here is what you're passing in. And again, when you're getting into these models, you use this ref parenthesis and the name of the model you want to refer to. And that's all it is. In this case, it becomes the analytical staging orders. Here it becomes the analytics staging customers. And the reason for that, of course, is you have that's the template that will replace those here. So when we run that, and that'll be the last one we're running here. So run it. And when you look at it now, you can see here is the select ref staging, ref customers, and the raw payments, blah, blah, blah. And here is what it's going to translate into, as you can see. All right, I think that's, you getting the idea, okay? So that's what the Jinja is all about that you see in DBT. I hope you like this video, and if you do, give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That'd be fantastic. I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.